Hello, my name is Lisa Singh. I will be presenting on Module 1, which is Organizational Theory, Structure, Culture, and Design. The course code is ED 810 Organizational Theory, and that's at the Department of Education at Aspen University. The professor is Dr. Barry Thompson. I'd like to just give you an overview of what I'll be discussing today. So I'll briefly just define my organization, um, touching on the way in which this organization that I'm employed by creates value, such as input, conversion, and output. I'll also discuss how managers here at the organization measure effectiveness. I'll provide examples of policies and procedures that support an organization's mission and vision. And I'll also provide a detailed explanation of each and select one that I would be most effective at implementing at this organization. So I'll begin. So we begin first with the description of the organization, specifically how it creates value, and we'll talk about input, conversion, and output. So I just want to start off with the definition of what an organization is. This is from Stewart 2001 reported that an organization was comprised of one or more persons that were specifically selected to aid an entity in meeting its goals. An organization would possess policy and procedures that would effectuate the orderly, efficient, moral, and ethical approach to tasks. Employees would be equipped and/or have access to specialized industry knowledge via training that would increase the value of the service or product offered. Jones 2013 reported that an organization creates value through the stages of input, conversion, and output. Environmental forces were said to affect the operations of the organization, as those forces would influence the ability of the organization in securing raw materials or employees that would be used in the creation of output. Jones 2013 reported that input referred to resources which would be used to produce a product or service. Resources included funding, raw materials, employees, and data and the comprehension of that data. Conversion referred to the strategy an organization engaged when using employees and technology to convert input into valued output. These included the abilities and skill of employees and machinery. Output referred to the finished product or service of the organization that will result after the input and conversion stages. These included not only the product or service, but salaries, dividends, and increased stock prices of the organization. My organization is a 160-bed long-term inpatient psychiatric hospital. The disciplines that care for the mentally ill here at the hospital are varied and include social workers, nurses, psychiatrists, physicians, recreational therapists, and psychologists. When positions for any of these disciplines become available, the organization solicits applicants on the company website. For each of these positions, the organization has candidates complete a job history form along with demographic and background check information. Each discipline must be certified in their field. So, social workers must be licensed clinical social workers, and nurses must be registered with the state. Any limitations to a nurse's license, such as being barred from the state registry for Medicaid services, eliminates the ability of the organization to bill for services performed by that nurse. Here we see an example of external forces of the organizational environment that influence and limit the ability of the organization in creating value. So if they hire a nurse that has a limited, that's been barred from the Medicaid registry, they're unable to bill. And so that limits their ability to produce a valued product, because they have a clinician who is unable to render that care. Thus, any nurse hired by the organization is one that has not been barred from the state registry for Medicaid services. We observe the very crisp selection of nurses for the organization, which aligns with Reeves' 2018 report that the means an organization engages to select input will determine the value created at the input stage. I'm sorry, that was Jones 2013. Sorry about that. The organization that I work for uses a holistic approach in the care of the mentally ill patient. This goal is achieved as all disciplines assess the mentally ill patient and collectively decide on treatment plan goals, objectives, and methods. The hope is that the mentally ill patient would move closer towards his or her spectrum of wellness. This is an example of the conversion stage, as Jones 2013 reported that value was created by service organizations as employees apply their skill to effectuate an output, such as a patient that has been cured. Well, for within this context, it's not so much that a person has been cured, but they've just been moved along closer to their spectrum of wellness. Yeah. The output then can be appreciated through My Hospital is a service that is released to the environment. The service includes stakeholders, which in this case would be the citizens of New York State, and satisfied patients and families. Okay, so now I'll get into an explanation of how managers here at the organization measure effectiveness. Jones 2013 reported that to measure the performance of an organization in creating value, those in authority at the organization engage control, innovation, and efficiency. Control referred to the control those in authority had over the external environment. Variables in the external environment that could be controlled included the raw materials or people, resources, and skills needed to produce products or services. This also included controlling the perception of the organization to outside entities such as stakeholders and investors. These dynamics encompass the external research approach reported by Jones 2013. Innovation referred to an organization's ability in skills development. The generation of new skills and aptitudes would place the organization in an advantageous position for product discovery and new processes for conversion. Simultaneously, the organization would undergo a change in the culture and structure to ensure that the organization's ability to improve and adapt the way products or services are delivered would be enhanced. Inherent in the dynamic of innovation is an organization's ability to respond quickly to changing needs and desires of the purchasers of the product or service. Thus, those in authority would need to be flexible so that the decision-making processes that govern the production of goods and services would be swift. Similarly, internal processes that impact those employees in the production of the organization's goods and services would also need to be flexible and respond quickly during times of change. These dynamics were encompassed in the internal systems approach discussed by Jones. Efficiency involved the organization's ability to identify newer technologies that would aid in the delivery of cost-effective products or services. Those on administrative levels would assess the ability of the organization in transforming skills and resources into output. Output would be measured against input to determine cost effectiveness. Efficiency would be determined by measuring output and whether an increased output was precipitated by the same labor force, as well as a decreased material labor cost resulting in the same amount of output. I can repeat that. Efficiency would be determined by measuring output and whether an increased output was precipitated by the same labor force, as well as, in addition to, a decreased material and labor cost resulting in the same amount of output. Yeah. The evaluation of wastage or defects in product would be executed along the spectrum of the output of the product or service. These dynamics were encompassed in the technical approach discussed by Jones 2013. Jones 2013 reported that to gauge the effectiveness of their organization, managers would do well by engaging in goal creation. So here's where I'm going to answer the question. I wanted to give a background. Goal creation would be born of the three approaches to assessing organizational effectiveness previously discussed. The two categories of goals are official and operative goals. Official goals are a set of principles that guide the organization. These principles often include the purpose of the organization and the tasks of the organization. Purpose and tasks of an organization are known as the organization's mission. Operative goals are those that guide employees and managers in the performance of duties of the organization. These duties are outlined by long and short-term goals. The goals are quantifiable and can measure such things as how long the organization takes to respond to employee protests of assignments and conflicts. So those were examples. I shared that I'm employed by a state-run inpatient psychiatric hospital. I work in the utilization review department and am tasked with identifying deficiencies in the medical psychiatric chart. These deficiencies include such items as a patient's core trauma not having been addressed in treatment goals or objectives. So that's an example of something that would be deficient. Patient comes in, there's core trauma. We need to address that core trauma. And if it's not addressed, then that would serve as a deficiency. These deficiencies are quantified at the end of each month. My supervisor is the director of program evaluation, and her tasks include not only quantifying the amount of deficiencies per discipline, but also identifying internal processes, how and when employees complete their assigned tasks that may have attributed to the precipitation of these deficiencies. Items such as these are compared to statistics generated by the state for all inpatient long-term mental health hospitals. For treatment plans, the goal is that appropriate plans would be developed without deficiencies with a goal of 100% compliance. So there are statistics that come down from Albany, that's our capital, and what they do is they give us, they supply us with the compliance rate of other hospitals, mental health hospitals, in relation to the deficiencies that are identified. And so there's a core set of deficiencies. There's something specific that Albany looks for, and that is one of those examples is the appropriate treatment plans. So the hope is that there will be 100% compliance. This is often not met in the hospital that is often the lowest ranking in compliance with this specific item. Unfortunately, this happens to be one of those hospitals that we rank lowest when it comes to the compliance. So now I'm going to get into a discussion of the policies and procedures that support an organization's mission and vision. We have some really great, the hospital has a mission plan that is very relevant, very appropriate. They've coupled the mission with the vision and the values, and I'll discuss that in a moment. The mission of the organization is to promote the mental health of all New Yorkers, with a particular focus on providing hope and recovery for adults with serious mental illness and children with serious emotional disturbances. The organization shares responsibility with a neighboring sister hospital in providing mental health services to residents of the borough of Brooklyn in New York. The organization offers a full range of mental health services ranging from intermediate and long-term inpatient psychiatric care to crisis and transitional residence treatment to community care. The organization does not accept direct admissions. Acute and emergency psychiatric care and inpatient services are provided by the Article 28 hospitals in the borough of Brooklyn, and if continued inpatient psychiatric hospitalization for intermediate long-term care is needed, individuals are referred and admitted to the organization by orders of transfer. So the mission is to provide comprehensive, rehabilitative, recovery-oriented services for the purposes of reintegrating clients to the least restrictive community environment in the shortest necessary time. Okay, so that was the mission, and I'll get into the policies that support this mission. I'd like to first discuss vision. The vision of the organization is to be the leading provider of mental health services to the residents of Brooklyn. The values include the 5 C's. So right to self-determination, that's not a C, but I'll get to the 5 C's in a minute. Partnering with clients for a timely transition to the least restrictive self-determined setting. Here come the 5 C's. Compassionate care, treating all clients with dignity, empathy, and respect. Collaboration, working together with clients and their families using evidence-based approaches to achieve recovery and wellness goals. Competence, securing and developing a competent workforce. Cultural sensitivity, having an awareness and appreciation for all while utilizing the strength of each individual to attain recovery. And communication, ensuring seamless communication across the continuum of care. To ensure the mission, vision, and values of the organization, to ensure that they may remain operable in operation, policies have been developed. Policies that support the mission, vision, and values of the organization. I've selected two: rights and responsibility of patients, and code of ethics and ethical principles. I'll talk about those. I will provide a detailed explanation of each. I won't take up too much of your time. So rights and responsibility of patients include the following tenets. So the purpose, to ensure support and protect the fundamental human, civil, constitutional, and statutory rights of all patients, regardless of their race, ethnicity, culture, language, sex, creed, religion, age, natural origin, sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression, socioeconomic status, and or the nature and severity of any disabling condition. So here's the policy. All employees of the organization are responsible for ensuring that patients receive the rights to which they are entitled and should not be deprived of any civil right for which they are eligible. It is, however, understood that the facility's mandate to protect patients, staff, and the community may impose certain restrictions. The services each patient receives shall be rendered in the cultural, psychosocial, and spiritual values that patients hold, often with the least restriction possible and in a therapeutic environment and milieu. The facility respects the individual rights of the patient and their family and supports an environment in which the patient feels comfortable in exercising their rights. Efforts are made to ensure that complaints by patients and families concerning these rights are responded to promptly. So now here we talk about one of the core values, personal dignity, value, beliefs, and needs, which is embedded in the policy for rights of the patient. So personal dignity, value, beliefs, and needs. Each patient's personal dignity, value, beliefs, and needs shall be recognized, considered, and respected in the provision of care and treatment. This is accomplished through this written policy on patient rights and responsibility, which is provided to and discussed with all new employees during their orientation. Conflict in care decisions and patient complaints. Any conflicts in care decisions and any complaints concerning discrimination, treatment issues, or access to service by the patients or their families may be aired in various ways, and there are channels that are discussed here. They can go through the ethics committee, which we do have here. They can go through treatment team. They can go through any staff member. Right to privacy and personal communication is also embedded in this policy. Each patient's personal privacy shall be assured and protected within the constraints of the individual service plan and the secure nature of the environment. And it talks about whenever visits are clinically contraindicated, a written order must be obtained by a physician. A visiting room area is to be set aside for visiting patients. In addition, patients or families can communicate orally or in writing if they wish with the treatment leaders, the patient advocates, members of the facility cabinet, members of the Board of Visitors, the Mental Health Legal Services, which is MHLS, the overarching agency, or the New York State Justice Center directly. And we do provide contact information for each of these entities. So now I'll talk about the Code of Ethics policy. And so this includes the following tenets. So let me discuss the purpose: to promote ethical standards that address issues related to competency of providers, professionalism, respect for the law, and the rights of patients to determine their care and to confidentially express their wishes and preferences. So the policy itself, all employees of the organization are expected to conduct themselves while at work and outside of work in compliance with the provisions of the Public Officers Law. Therefore, the Code of Ethics of the facility and the ethical guidelines and principles outlined in the policy are applicable throughout the facility. These principles must be followed by all staff and are in addition to and not a substitute to the ethical guidelines recommended by their respective professional societies or associations and laws of the United States of America and the state of New York. Upon employment, each employee will be required to acknowledge their receipt, understanding, or responsibility in following the guidelines outlined in this policy. So the Ethics Committee advises the leadership of the hospital to ensure ethical considerations guide the care and treatment of patients and the policies and procedures which govern care and treatment. The Ethics Committee shall be utilized to consider and advise in cases which involve special circumstances or matters involving employee-patient relationships not directly addressed in this facility. So here it outlines, the policy outlines what some of those things might be and what they include. So here we have close relationship, one-on-one interaction between a patient and an employee in which a substantial amount of time is spent together outside of the context of services that constitute a patient's treatment plan. That can get a little hairy, and definitely ethics is warranted. Commercial discussion on ethics is warranted. Commercial advantage, the purchase or provision of goods or services at other than fair market value. There's also exploitation, the use by an employee of a patient's person or property, or of the treatment or service provision relationship in a manner that results in or is intended to result in personal profit or gain. Sexual behavior, engaging in any form of communication intended to promote or produce sexual contact, and or sharing or providing sexually stimulating media irrespective of any physical touching or sexual contact. Sexual contact, any touching of the sexual or other intimate parts of a person's body with the intent of gratifying sexual desire of either party. Treatment or service provision relationship, provision of mental health services, residential counseling. The prompt asked for one that I would be able to most effectively implement in my own organization, and I believe that I would be able to present the very delicate issues surrounding the code of ethics and ethical behavior to learners, employees of my own organization. Bradshaw and Hultquist, 2017, reported that that where problems exist and learning must take place regarding those problems, an educational process known as problem-based learning, or PBL, proved to be a valuable resource that can be utilized to ensure that learning about the problem occurs. Let's face it, anytime there's an ethics issue, that's a problem. That's a Houston problem. The approach would guide instructors in forming small groups that would be presented with a scenario of the problem. The approach would aid learners in identifying the problem and learning how to understand and approach the problem. Discussions would be held amongst learners in their groups. A brief period of self-study where reading materials regarding the problem would be given that is independent of the group, as well as a presentation by instructors regarding that reading material would be afforded to learners. Once learners completed the self-study and the discussion with the instructor, they would be asked to return to the group so that an application of their new understanding could be applied to the problem. This is the approach that I would use. I thank you for your time. Have a great evening, Dr. Thompson. I really look forward to learning with you. I loved your introduction. Again, it's Lisa Singh. Thank you for your time.